The opinions expressed on the radio program by the hosts, co-hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions and responsibility of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Genesis Radio, www.genesisradio.com, Genesis Radio's owners, management, or affiliates.
It's another Thoughtful Thursday, and you're on air with Reasons for Reasons, and I'm your host, Ron Yates. So joining me tonight is someone who's no stranger to Genesis, someone who has her own show in development.
Yes, I do. It's me, Amazing Amy.
Amazing Amy, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. So, Amy, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit.
Sure.
So something you said the other night, we were talking after the show, politicking show.
Mm-hmm.
You said that your generation, Generation Z, will never be able to do things like buy a home.
Yes, I did say that.
You did,
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of struck a chord with me
Okay.
because essentially that is the American dream.
Yeah.
So, do a lot of Gen Zers believe that the American dream, what was the American dream, is now just the American scheme?
Yeah, so let's talk about it, right? So I would consider myself a millennial. I'm at the end of millennials, I guess. I was born in 95.
Mm-hmm.
I think Gen Z is right after me. They probably start like 97, 98. So
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
we're having similar struggles, though, as far as I don't think we think it's unattainable, but we're having a much harder time getting the things that maybe your generation or even Gen X got kind of, it seems easier.
Mm-hmm.
It's an uphill battle for us. So if you want to get into specifics, we can, but we do feel a little shortchanged on the American dream concept.
Well, as it relates to, say, my generations before me, does millennials, Generation X, millennials, Generation Z,
Mm-hmm.
are they angry with our generation?
A little bit. You know why? Because the things we're not able to do, your generation faults us like as character flaws. We can't buy a home, we can't save for retirement because we're not working hard enough, because we're not doing the right things. But we're trying as hard as we can, and we're just not able to get there. Um, the first thing I think that set us back was go to college.
Mm-hmm.
That was what we were told to do, and that put us in a big pot of debt that we don't know what to do with now.
Right. Well, you know what? I do understand, because a lot of decisions that were made by my generation and generations before me were detrimental to yours.
Yeah.
And those decisions were made. There's really no way to justify it other than to be honest about it. During that time, we're talking, we're going back 30 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
I was a police officer, and during that time, the department and our bargaining unit, PBA, had agreed to some pretty decent salaries,
Mm-hmm.
some pretty decent increases. Benefits would not be affected. So, of course, we quickly signed off. You don't want to lose anything. Over time, things began to change. I was a Port Authority police officer, so Port Authority never really had a problem with money.
Mm-hmm.
They generate their money from the George Washington Bridge, Lincoln Tunnel, Howland Tunnel, the airport. So they never really had a problem with money. But at some point, the department decided that they were going to, I guess, reduce their overhead some.
Right.
So while they would give us a contract that would have a fairly decent increase, what they began to do is sort of eliminate those benefits that we had for generations to come.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I did 20 years and got out.
Right.
Now it's 22 years.
Mm-hmm.
For me, all of my overtime went toward my final average salary and my pension.
Right.
That doesn't happen anymore.
Correct.
Medical benefits during that time, we didn't pay for them. Now, the new officers coming on are required to pay, I think, 3 to 5% of their benefits, medical benefits, which, depending on your family size, could be a substantial amount of money.
Right.
The decision was made to do that because I guess at the time, the PBA president and those other officials figured that was the best deal we're ever going to get. There's nothing better coming down the pipe. Yet it sold out what was called the unborn, your generation,
Yeah.
and the generations after you.
Yes, that's an interesting point because you mentioned you were a police officer. That's a
Mhm.
civil service job.
Yes.
Those jobs are supposed to come with great benefits. You're supposed to be able to work 30, 40, 35 years average,
Mhm.
and then you retire with something. Now, people like you, people like my father who work those type of roles, they're living comfortably now, right? And like you said, those pots of money have run out from my generation.
Mhm.
So when you were probably, let's say, coming out of high school or getting ready for college, you were able to buy into different programs that would help you.
Yes.
Let's also talk about the difference between dollars 30 years ago and today's dollars. They're different dollars, even though they have the same cash value, right? So whereas you were able to buy into programs that supported you through school, funneled you to a career, that then also had benefits for you throughout and after your employment, we don't get those things. Those pots ran out, like I said, so we don't have the funding, we don't get the same benefits, we get more taxes pulled, and our dollars are just different than your dollars.
Well, the value of the American dollar has been shrinking for generations now.
Yeah.
Business, corporations say that the weak dollar is good in foreign markets, but we don't live in a foreign market. We live right here in the United States, and a weak dollar does not help people like you, people like me. It may help the wealthiest among us.
Yes.
But for people who are, basically living paycheck to paycheck, no, it does not help.
Yeah.
But now, one of the problems that I see with millennials and Gen Z, I think that a lot of people don't fully understand your age group.
I agree.
I think a lot of people just see a lot of young people who seem to be just
Lost.
infatuated with their cell phones. True. And you
guys think we're detached a little bit from reality.
I think that a lot of people say that millennials, Gen Zers are spoiled, entitled, right? I don't think that's the case. I think that a lot of you are dealing with just the realities, right? The economic realities, the social realities.
Yeah.
I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I am glad that I was not born, to be a millennial or definitely Generation Z, because the world you're coming up in is, in many respects, foreign to the world I grew up in.
Yeah.
We were not under constant surveillance. There's cameras everywhere monitoring everything you do. We didn't have cell phones. We could be tracked everywhere we go, right?
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have to worry about those things. We didn't have to worry about school shootings. I cannot remember somebody getting shot in a school during my time, from elementary through high school. I just don't remember that happening.
It was a foreign concept, but it's a normal thing for even the kids younger than me, because I think I remember my first school shooting was Virginia Tech, and I think that was 2007. I think that's the first one I remember in my lifetime. But since then, it's been a normal, I don't want to say normal, regular, consistent occurrence to the point where kids in school think it's normal. So as in terms of my generation, even the ones after me, we're dealing with financial problems, different socioeconomic issues, different psychological issues, even with surveillance, right? When you were a teenager or a young person, you were able to go outside and we say be in the streets, but you were able to have a good time and not necessarily worry about everything being posted on the internet or recorded. So we don't even have those same freedoms
Right.
to live as freely. So when your generation, or I don't want to say yours, but when other generations before us might call us entitled, we're just a little PO'd. We're a little upset.
Mhm.
And it's not that we feel entitled to anything, but we do feel a little robbed where, well, why isn't anything available for us? And we
Mhm.
keep hearing, well, work hard, find a good job, make more money, but everything is so rough. Look at even the last year that we've had and this year, everything is so tight. Money is tight, groceries are expensive, gas is expensive, rent is expensive. If you're a millennial or even a Gen X person who's able to live on their own, have a vehicle on their own, like let's say have their own bills, that's like an accomplishment. But your other generations were able to do that straight out of high school,
Right.
get married at 19, have kids at 22, be in their careers at 25. By 30, they have savings, they're traveling, they're going on vacations. Like
Mhm.
we're just a little annoyed because we cannot. Everything's so hard for us. We have to work so hard for it.
I don't think, and this is me speculating.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that when, um, say the PBA in my case and other collective bargaining units, I don't think they ever envisioned things would be this bad.
Right.
I don't think they ever thought that gas would be at some point nearly $5 a gallon. We never envisioned that.
Yeah.
I guess maybe in hindsight we should have, because our government does not change. The things that they've done 50, 60, 100 years ago are some of the same things that they're doing now. You know, you mentioned '07. Well, in '08, we had a financial collapse.
Mm-hmm. I was 12. What were we gonna do after that? you know.
Yeah, you had the major investment houses saying, hey, look, we're cash strapped
Mm-hmm.
and we're too big to fail.
We have a guess.
We do. Caller, welcome to the show.
Hey, good evening. How you doing, young man?
I'm doing well, thank you. How you doing, Brother Kendall?
I'm doing well. So, Amy.
Yes, sir. Good
I just
evening.
heard you make a statement, and this is the statement. I'm gonna tell you what I heard from my point of view. Is that you think that you should be entitled to something and you don't think you should have to work hard for it. I'm just gonna run it by like this. I stood out in the cold from hanging on a picket line, because fighting for what we wanted at the time, which is better health care, which is better salaries, and so forth and so on. Now, as time went on, the younger people, and I'm not, this is even, you're a predecessor, people prior to you. So we're about 3 or 4 generations apart, about 2 generations apart. So that in between generation thought that they were entitled to everything, that they should get everything, that they should not have to fight for anything. Now, I understand that there's this, that, and the other about the union and about the bargaining table. But without the bargaining table and these things, we have nothing. We end up with just what we end up with right now, because people don't want to fight for what they want. They think that they're entitled to it. And the corporations are taking advantage of that, and they're telling people, you don't need to be in a union. Why should you spend your money in a union? What are you getting out of the union? Well, for me, I got good salary, I got good medical care. I always tell people, the company that I work for, they bought my house. They paid for my kids to go to school. And I had to fight for that. I had to stand out on picket lines because of the union. And I'm not talking once or twice. What if people are willing to sacrifice and fight for now? Where are they at fighting? These are young people that are complaining about not receiving things. What are they doing about it?
But you know what, Kendall? Let me just say this. I was going to eventually kind of segue into that. But there are young people that are out there fighting. Do you remember Black Lives Matter movement?
I literally was just gonna say we started one of the biggest activist
Right.
movements of our time.
We're not talking about Black Lives
No, but you're talking about fighting.
Against being abused.
Yeah, but you were talking about fighting.
He's
You're talking about fighting, right?
in regards to work benefits or
You're not getting justification in the workforce You
Okay.
feel that you can't buy a home because you can't earn enough money. And I'm telling you why you can't earn enough money, because you got to get out there and you actually got to unify, come together, and you're going to have to fight for those things.
Well,
There's a lot of
but
different people,
again,
they don't
that's
they don't
why.
wanna do that.
Yeah, but that's why I mentioned Black Lives
I'm
Matter,
gonna chime in
because it
after.
was coming together of young people. And it
Right.
started out as a movement against police brutality, but it didn't have to stay that
Right.
way. They could have talked about the issues that affect their generation, like the lack of jobs, like the lack of opportunity. And you know what? It I think we got to stop blaming this particular generation.
I
I
want to.
think
I want to answer though.
Right.
I want to.
Okay.
I want to chime in a little bit about everything regarding the fighting. Let's start right. Black Lives Matter wasn't in
Right.
regards to workplace or benefits through income. It
Mhm.
wasn't for that. We had another issue to address there.
Mhm.
And let me just say, it's not that your generation didn't. We know your generation had to fight for civil rights issues. That was our civil rights issue. Black
Mhm.
Lives Matter. That's how we address that. As far as workplace benefits and us complaining and feeling entitled, Kendall, you mentioned that in your time, you guys were fighting for a union. You were fighting to get a union even instated. Am I right on that?
No, we had a union.
Okay.
We had a union. The union was already here.
All right.
Communication workers are already here. But every contract, you had to get out there and you had to fight for what you wanted. Because the company was not going to give it to you. The company was more or less trying to take things away from you. So
Hmm.
this is where the bargaining table came in. And while they were at the I'm on the picket line striking.
Well, you know what? If we're talking about those type of fights, I will say I can't think of a specific instance where my generation has fought for their workplace rights. I think we have attacked that in different ways, not necessarily as a group, but there are things we've done as a collective that's different than generations before us. But it's not necessarily us going to our employers and saying, "You need to give us this."
Well, and I think that
Well, that's kind of
overall,
what we had to do.
Right.
I mean, to get what we wanted to get, that's what we had to do. When I started working way back when, I was making $7.25 an hour. And we had to fight tooth and nail to get to $10. Then we had to fight tooth and nail to get to 15, and eventually we got a decent salary where we had a living wage. My man can attest to it. Back in our time, we had this thing called COLA, which is a cost allowance of living. They've done away with that. A lot of things have been done away, and they've been done away at the bargaining table because the people that had to fight, why should we give up anything?
And I want to mention another point.
Going to come in that don't want to fight for it.
Also, I think
have
that
guys coming in that don't want to pay. They don't want to pay union dues. My man could also attest. We had people there, instead of fighting, they crossed the picket line and went right back to the company. The company that we were fighting. We had people that crossed it, and this was at the end of my career. So these are the next generation of people coming in. They would actually cross the picket line and go back to work.
yeah. So I'm gonna say I don't think it's
That's how they
fair.
fight.
I don't think it's fair to say we haven't fought. I just thought of it. The Amazon workers who protested for fair working conditions from Amazon, one of the biggest corporations, one of the biggest employers in the country, they fought.
Right.
Those are people from my generation. Those were kids that didn't go to college or didn't go to trade school and went straight to work at Amazon, and they were treated poorly and they fought for those things. So those things like that have happened. What I will say is I think my generation, we didn't work as a collective. When you say we went and we fought, you gathered as a group, you unionized, you went and you spoke to employers. Also, I think you guys grew up in a time where your employers were more willing to hear what you had to say. They were more open
to some extent,
that exchange of you're doing something for us and we're going to do something for you. You wash my hand, I wash
Mhm.
yours. Our companies and our times aren't really looking at that.
Well, you know what? The thing is that in this country, people are so stressed out. People are so beaten down by the economic realities. We're not fighting, right?
Mhm.
As a whole.
Yeah.
We were talking the other day about this congestion pricing in New York. Why would the people of New York who are struggling to get by every day, why would you sit back and allow the government to place another tax on you? You can barely pay the taxes that you have. What it costs you to travel is now going to increase, right?
Correct.
I was in France a couple of years back, and I think the day we left or the day after, the government, President Macron said, we're going to raise the price of gasoline.
Mhm.
and Paris erupted in flames.
The French were outside. They don't play when it comes to their government.
What about why is it that the
We
American
live
people,
in the United Divided States of America.
and that's the problem.
It's every man for himself. We know that.
That's the problem.
That's how it is. That's how it's always been. That is the culture of the United States. It is united in quotes. We do not do anything together. Like Kendall was saying earlier.
Well,
Yeah.
we, when you say we, because
Mhm.
we're opposing people, they seem to move, they seem to make plans 10, 15 years down the road, and they seem to be able to execute these plans, and they do it uniformly. We seem to be easily manipulated and easily divided, and then in the end, they win, we lose.
Unfortunately, yes. I just looked at I read an article about a workplace survey that they did, and there was a Christmas bonus to be given to a group of employees. And the boss basically said, now everyone will get basically a 50% increase. We'll give that to everybody, or should we basically rank everyone the same? Like, should we rank everyone based on their individual performance, or should we across the board give everyone a 50% bonus this Christmas? And I think 3 people voted that they get their individual performance rankings over everyone just getting the same thing.
Mhm.
You know, it's cases like that where people are looking out for their own interests, even at the detriment of someone else. So we have become a very individualistic society, and my generation has picked that up. So what I was going to say about the way we fight that, we don't fight the inequality of companies or jobs or our employment not giving us what we deserve. We don't do that together. We do that on a very individual level. So millennials and Gen Zs are big on job hopping.
Mhm.
That's foreign to baby boomers and Gen X's because you guys were of the generation of get a job and work there for 30 years. And when you leave, you're good for life.
Right.
We don't get that, or we're not seeing that vision the same way.
Mhm.
So what my generation will do is we'll come out of school, we'll get a job for 2 years that pays us this little bit. We'll get that time and we'll leave and go to another company, ask for more money, maybe get better benefits, but that's our sense of climbing the ladder. That's how we are tackling that problem, because we're seeing that stay in a company for even more than 3 years, there's no benefit there.
Right.
No change in
Well,
title.
I can tell you, Amy, is that it was the same back in my day. We had
Mm.
for that job hop. You were hoping to get a job with like the phone company or trying to get a job into the city. You were working so really hard
Right.
to take those civil service tests because you were trying to get a job that you could stay with them for 30 years. But other
Right.
than that, you were job hopping. I mean, I went from loading backs of trailers and all kind of nonsense. I worked in security. I worked so many jobs until I got that one job that I was able to work and stay on for 30 years.
But I think
And I got it. We had the right to keep it.
But you know, the problem is for our generation and generations before us, we had the possibility of upward mobility. That's something that is lacking now. And it is because, in many respects, the decisions that we made to basically give concessions to management, to the corporations. We made concessions that have affected generations after us. And things are only going to get worse.
You spoke about that earlier today, right?
We were.
My opinion was a little different than yours. My opinion was okay. I'm in a company. Let me give you a scenario. I'm working at a company. I'm there 20 years. Now, you know the company is trying to take things away, like education. They don't want to pay so much for medical. Now, these guys get to the bargaining table. The company says, we want to cut back on your medical. We want to cut back on education. We want to price these things. So the union says, well, you're going to do this anyway, but can we save the people that's been here for 20 years? New people coming in, okay, well, now to me, just like we had to fight for it, they're going to have to fight for it. So those are the kind of concessions that they made for the people that already put in the work, that already put in the time, the people that was already here. So if we didn't put in concessions and we conceded to that, then everybody would lose.
Not necessarily. The thing is, we are under the belief that we have to make concessions. Well, we've made so many concessions. Look at the condition for people like Amy and her generation. Look at the concessions we made. And what has it gotten us? It's gotten a group of people who no longer believe in the American dream. And you know what? Let's be realistic. The American dream has always been the American scheme. It is a belief
Yeah.
that was held that if you work hard, you can achieve X, Y, and Z. The reality is the people that work the hardest are people that are paid the least amount of money. That's just the economic reality.
Amy, what
Yeah.
I want to ask you, I got a question I'd like to ask you.
Sure.
So with all the scenarios and all of these things going on, what do you plan on doing about, I don't know, maybe changing some of the situation? Because we were talking earlier and they say, well, about our leaders. Okay, well, forget about our leaders. I think our leaders should be the person that you look at in the mirror. That's where your first leader should be in at. So I just want to ask you, with all the things that are going on, what do you plan on doing about it? How are you going to do things to make changes?
For myself personally,
Well, not for you, but for here we go. Here's
you see, and that's the thing.
I'm
Exactly.
talking about for our people in general. What plans or what do you got that we're going to do to help bring us together so that we can go to this bargaining table collectively?
So if I was going to answer this question politically correctly, it would be I would see what my generation's main issues are. Then I would see who do we need to address that with, right? I guess on a broad scale, you would say the government. How do we attack the government? I don't even know if my generation
Well,
is,
that's going to be legislation, and that's going to be local first.
and that comes with education.
Who our congressmen and or our state representatives are.
So
So we
that
have
requires
to be
two things.
educated in those things first.
That requires education. That requires a willingness and a belief. And like Brother Ron just said, if I already don't believe this is going to work for me, why would I even buy into the belief that fighting forward is going to get me
It
something?
really takes one thing, and that's unity, right?
Yeah.
Because in the 1960s, even before that, it was always the young people that changed the focus of the government.
100%.
It was the young people that said, get out of Vietnam. It was the young people that said, we want our rights as Black people in this country. We want the right to vote. We want equal protection under law. It was young people that did that. They weren't necessarily highly educated,
Right.
but they had a vision for their future. They did not want their children's children to go through what they went through. See, I can remember going down to South Carolina, where my parents are from, and seeing the white-only signs.
Yeah.
I can remember traveling from New York to South Carolina, and I never knew why my aunt carried a jar. And that was because you couldn't go to all the bathrooms. Some service stations would not allow you to use their bathroom.
Mhm.
We came about, right, at the end of a period, Jim Crow, segregation, right? The year I was born was the year the voting rights legislation was signed,
Yeah.
right? So one of the fallouts from that was I can remember growing up in New York, I was bused to the other side of Brooklyn. Why? Because they said, well, we're going to give education opportunity to those children that we consider gifted and talented. What about the rest of us? Why not just take the funding and allocate it equally to all the school districts in New York? The way of getting around that is we're going to send the Black kids out there. Some of them we're going to send out there. But in terms of funding, we're not going to put another dime into their communities. So it takes unity of people to get together and who are going to decide, look, we're not going to take this anymore. As a worker, right? You mentioned Amazon. You mentioned Amazon, right? That's Jeff Bezos. He's one of the richest men on the planet.
Yeah.
But when the workers decided, I'm not moving another damn box until I'm assured I'm going to be paid properly, a decent living wage. I can have medical benefits to protect me and my family. I'm not moving your boxes. What does Jeff Bezos do? He ain't going to do it.
He got robots.
Well, he's going to sit down and discuss.
Everybody's got to be down with that in order for that to work. And you got the turncoats and people that's going to go do it anyway.
It's this unity factor. I will say I don't know how to answer, and I don't know the answer to the question of how to invigorate my generation and generations after us to want to fight for something that we don't believe exists for us. So
You're a smart woman, and you're a very, very intelligent woman.
Thank you.
I think with you, or people like you, and I know other people that are in your age group that are probably want to get down with some of what you do, and maybe you guys can actually start doing something.
I'm not opposed to that. I'm not. But I will say that, like when you asked me the question, and I said, for myself personally, I think that's how we're all thinking right now: is how do I make sure I'm good today? And we still care about our families, and we still want to make sure that other areas of our life are taken care of. But there is an emphasis on making sure that I'm afloat, because it's very much like there's nothing to catch us if we fall.
So let me ask you this
Now, see,
question.
that's the changes that you have from your time period to my time period. In my time period, if the community wasn't doing well, then no one was doing well.
That's
So what we
interesting.
did is we looked out for each other in our own community. We started the Black Panther Party.
Hmm.
Even the gangs that were in New York, the Tomahawks, all those gangs, they were about protecting their own community first,
Yeah.
first and foremost.
Well,
We had the Black Panthers that started their after school programs and all kind of things that we had going on, but we did it ourselves. We didn't wait for any funding from anybody. We didn't wait for anybody to say do this or do that. We got together. We said, okay, this is what we want, and we put together quietly. We didn't like now anybody that air that
We
dirty
have the
laundry
internet. My generation doesn't know how to utilize that.
We did it
Mhm.
quietly.
Yeah.
We argued amongst each other, or we had whatever we argued. We did that privately, so that when we came out in front of people, we came out with one thought, one mind, one people.
Well, here's a question I have for you,
We,
Amy.
Yeah.
we could kind of get back to that.
Kendall, let me just ask
That was
Amy this one
a lot
question.
of the things that you want.
So, in terms of the millennials and Generation Z, what is your optimism or level of optimism for America?
I
That's a
can't.
really good question.
Our level of optimism for America.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'll give my outlook on America. I
And
can't
be
say
perfectly honest, be honest.
I can't say we have too much.
Mhm.
We've seen so many negative, detrimental, damaging things happen. And I really don't want to sit here and make us sound like the victim generation. Everybody had horrible things happen during their lifetime
Right.
that they had to bounce back from. I just don't think we have the same opportunities to create the kind of things that you guys were able to create with your unionizing of not only each other, like, get your coworkers getting together and saying, we're going to go to our boss and say this isn't right. Also, that community you were able to form was because you guys were living in reality. We're living on our phones a lot.
Mhm.
That creates a division where we only see our individual lives.
Right.
I'm only looking at my Facebook page. I'm only going on my Instagram, checking my likes and my followers. And I think that really has psychologically damaged millennials and Gen Z,
Mhm.
because we don't see like real life a lot. So that's where a lot of the individualism comes from too. But my outlook for America is bleak. My optimistic outlook for America is bleak. I don't think the government supports us. I don't think there's any programs in place to make sure that we're set for life outside of civil service jobs. Like,
Mhm.
I have a nephew that's a little younger than me, and he's worked at the post office the last 4 or 5 years, and he's going to stay there until he retires, because why wouldn't he? You know, that's a good move, even though he went to college and he got a degree and all those things. But I think we've also seen that there's different paths. Millennials, there was the go to college, get a job, but now we're branching into entrepreneurship a lot. I think a lot of our generation is seeing how starting businesses could be a better opportunity than working for someone. So I think we're just exploring our options, but we are definitely a little PO'd. We're upset, and we don't see a lot of optimism. So we're just focusing on what can I do to make sure I'm okay, and maybe my one or two other friends are okay. But outside of that group, I don't think we're looking as like trying to save our whole generation. Like I said, how do we reinvigorate that want to fight when we don't believe it?
Well, Kendall and I were talking earlier about leadership, right? I guess we're focusing more on Black leadership. So, in terms of so-called leaders, who resonates with, say, millennials, Generation Z? Anybody?
I think unless you're in like that activism space, which is like it shouldn't be the case. Everyone knew who MLK was. Everyone knew who Malcolm X was, whether or not you were in that, like on the ground with them. I can't think of any millennial Gen Z activists who are out here fighting for us as a group. Maybe that's a lack of education on my part, but if there was someone like that, it should be public knowledge. So I can't say there's anyone I'm like off the top of my head. That's not like a celebrity who we're just like inspired by in a aesthetic, materialistic way.
Right.
I can't say there's anybody out there like, we deserve better and we're saying
Would
something
you
about it.
say, Amy, I just want to ask a question. Would you say that the youth of today has become very complacent?
Yeah, I think we're very passive. I think we're very much. I can see how you would call us entitled because we have a lot to say, but we're not doing much about it. I'll agree with that. But I
There
was,
we go.
yeah, I think the things we're doing are very much individual. I don't think anything that we're doing is going to impact any type of real change. Um, but like you said, there's room for somebody to come up and do something about that. But right
That's
now,
why I keep looking at you.
I'm hearing you guys. Trust me. I'm just saying right now we're just like I'm just making sure we're just looking out for
Listen,
ourselves.
when we talk about people that are making differences in our community, and just in our local community, and not to, you have people in this community. I don't know if you know Tamiko Patterson, but that would be somebody that you may want to talk to that would maybe help you along to help you accomplish the goals that you want to accomplish as far as bringing people together. You have people like Michael DeRosier. He's another cat that does just exactly that. They have youth programs right here to help the young people to get scholarships and so forth, and they help them to go into school, and they have counsel for. I've met with a lot of these different people that actually do things in this community, and I'm saying you might want to hook up with some of those people, and
Absolutely.
maybe you can make that contribution that you like.
Sure, I'm glad to make that connection. Let me know, and I'm happy to get involved. But
All
yeah,
you gotta do is ask. I got you.
thank you, my
Well, let me
brother.
ask you this.
Whoever you think that you need to meet, I get you front door face to face with them.
Sure, we
Any
will talk about that.
politician locally you want to talk to, and any community leaders that are here you need to speak to, I got you.
If there's room for change, I
Well,
want to be in the room.
there's always room for change. But,
Yeah.
but here's my question for you. If you had the power, what would be your vision for this country, for your generation, moving forward? What would you like to see?
I think we started with the concept of the American dream, and I think that is all anybody really wanted to be able to. Let me just put like a scenario out there, right? You grow up, you go to school, you get an education. Your parents tell you, go to school, get a degree, study something that you can get a job, graduate, set yourself up for life. That degree is supposed to come with a salary. It's
Mhm.
supposed to come with benefits. We're not getting, my generation isn't getting a lot of that. In a perfect world, that scenario that we were sold would have worked out that way. It would have
Mhm.
worked out where I would have went to college, I would have got a degree, and I would have got out of school and got a job in my career field that set me up for life. And not to say like some of the reasons certain things didn't happen wasn't circumstantial, but I think the fact that my generation as a whole is experiencing this, it can't just be a one-off basis.
Mhm.
So in a perfect world, that dream would have worked out. We would have been able to secure ourselves down somewhere, wake up in the morning, have our coffee, read our paper, go to work, come home, fall in love, have kids, take care of them, take care of the home, afford groceries and a car note and a mortgage, and be able to live a good life. Maybe take a vacation once a year.
Mhm.
In a perfect world, that's what we would want. Also,
You know, I'm gonna tell you something.
yeah.
I have 2 master's degrees.
Uh-huh.
I'm gonna tell you, basically, I went to college, and this is what I mostly got out of it. I learned how to become a critical thinker.
Yeah.
Not so much of the whatever courses I was taking. I took IT, educational technology specialist. I'm not a teacher, and I don't work in IT. I ended up working in another capacity where I made good money. I was making more money at that than what I did going with my college degree. But by me going to college, I did learn how to become a critical thinker. So that everybody couldn't come up to me and tell me whatever, that the sky is green, but I'm looking at it's blue. That I don't have to agree with everything that people say. I can actually take the time and learn how to do research for myself. When we looked at this last election, there was a lot of disinformation that was put out. There was so much nonsense that was put out where people were manipulated. They were lied to, and they believed it because they don't do any research.
Right.
Because we're told we don't need to have an education. We don't need to go to school. We can just take we can learn how to become a nurse in 12 months instead of 4 years like we normally did. So they dummy us down,
And just like Trump said, I love the poorly educated. He loves the poorly educated because they're easy to manipulate. So yes, we do need to go to college. We do need education. And yes, college may not be for everyone, but education is.
I
Whatever
agree.
form it is that you decide to go, if you're going to go to trade school, whatever, but you do need to be educated in order to sustain yourself financially.
I agree with that to an extent. I'm not saying that we shouldn't, that, I'm not saying college isn't the route everyone should take or that it's not for everyone. We know that that's the case, but I just think if it would have worked out the way you said, we would be a little less upset. I'm not saying we don't need to have an education. I'm saying you told us to go to college. Not only that, college costs us $40,000-$50,000. We have to pay that back with no job. We feel away. So I'm just saying, understand where we're coming from a little bit. Where, again, you guys were able to set up.
Funny?
Yeah.
I got 2 master's degrees. Because of I was in a union, and because of what took place in the bargaining table, my company that I worked for paid 100%.
And I was going to get back to that point, is that we went to school on bigger debt than you guys had to go to school on. You probably got programs to support you throughout school. We didn't get that. Now we have to pay this debt back. We keep hearing, we're going to forgive them. We're going to forgive them. You're just dangling the cherry in front of us and we're never really going to get it. So there's a lot of promises that haven't been followed through on for my generation. And that's why we feel like,
But you know something?
what are we fighting for?
But here's the thing. In this country, there have been so many promises that were made that were never delivered upon.
In general, yeah.
You know, Dr. King said that America wrote a check that came back insufficient funds.
They're
Right?
still writing that check too.
Still writing that check, right? And you know what? A lot of what is happening started probably in the 1980s, right? When Reagan was elected, right? It began the largest redistribution of wealth in history, right? He came with some idea of trickle down economics. What do you mean trickle down?
And tell them what he did to the union.
And what he did was he began.
Brother Kendall, see how mad you just got? That's how we feel.
Well, yeah, because he was the one that started the breaking of the labor movement. When one of the first things he did when he got into office, air traffic controllers were on strike. He fired them. Right now, today, there's a shortage of air traffic controllers. Greyhound bus drivers were on strike. He fired them too. That's a private corporation, not government. But because they travel over interstate commerce, gave them the right to fire them.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
So
You want to turn around?
the problem is that our government has been taking more and more from us. If you look at CEO salaries from 20 years ago, and you look at what a CEO makes now,
right,
300 times what the average maker
I wanted to mention that too.
and it continues to go up year after year.
Yep.
And for the most of us, we're fighting for the little crumbs that fall off the table.
And let me mention something else, because you brought up CEOs, right? You said, what's our generation doing about the fact that this and that? What happened in December? The United Healthcare CEO, what happened to him? I'm not saying that was right. I'm just saying that's what we're doing about it. That's how those are the type of things that are happening because of just this great, what we feel like is such a huge injustice to us. What do you mean I'm paying health insurance from a job that's not paying me enough? I'm getting taxed more than I can afford already to pay into this plan, and when I go to use it, it's not covered.
Well, you know something? Probably in the 1930s, the early 1930s. So the stock market crashed in 29. The banks had basically taken everybody's money and was foreclosing on people's properties. Well, look, the economy has collapsed. How am I supposed to work? The businesses have folded. So as a result, what happened was you had people like Bonnie and Clyde. You had people like Dillinger. And they had a cult following because the people were tired of the government. People were tired. It's like Fannie Lou Hamer said, just tired of being sick and tired. Seeing the government just taking everything away from them. Yeah. And now you had people who are actually who were Robin Hoods of the day, robbing from the rich and giving hope to the poor.
Yeah.
And I kind of see a correlation with that and what happened to the guy from United Healthcare.
Yeah. I want to say my generation might take more of a vigilante approach because we are thinking on the individual level. Like that was personal, you know, what he did to that man was personal. But every generation fought in their own way. The question does remain: how are millennials and Gen Z fighting back? That's a good question.
I think that the problem is that none of us are fighting right now, right?
We got too much to worry about.
Well, not just that. We think that by going to the ballot box, we're bringing about real change. You know, like in November, we went and we swept out the Democrats from the White House, from the House, both chambers of Congress. And people really believe that there's going to be change, that everything that has happened in this country, the negativity is all going to be reversed by one man.
Well, that's just ignorance and not knowing how the whole thing works. It was never controlled by one man, you know.
Mhm.
If you know much about the government or just surface level about the government, the president is a sort of like a character. He's in character for a station. He does have power, but a lot of stuff isn't in his control per se.
Well, it didn't used to be that way, right? Congress is supposed to hold the keys to the power, right? But incrementally over time, the president has taken powers for himself, not necessarily ones he should have or she should have. Of course, we never had a female president yet.
Mm-hmm.
But these powers they have allocated for themselves, not in the Constitution. Like Trump said, I have the power to do whatever I want to do as president. Well, where do you get that from? You won't find it in the Constitution. But in his mind, he can do these things, and he has a cult following amongst Congress that's going to basically allow him to do these things.
Yeah, because it's a different kind of trickle down effect. If every president before him has been giving themselves a little bit of power, isn't that being passed on to the next one, the next one, the next one?
Absolutely,
every time?
it is.
So it's like the final boss when you play video game. It's like this is the final person to defeat. So we kind of feel like that about this president. The fact that he's able to be the president again in and of itself is crazy. But again, when we go back to this whole concept of what are millennials doing about it, how many times, think psychologically, how many times can you cry wolf per se?
Right.
How many times can you promise something and not come through on it and expect there to still be enthusiasm about that? So it goes back to that.
I want to ask another question for you. Just to ask you a quick question. When you went to school, did you have a civics class?
A civics class?
Mm-hmm. Probably not.
No.
What I'm saying to say is that in your generation, and even the generation that came, I guess, prior to you, in my generation, we had to take civics. Now, what civics did, it taught us as young people about how the government actually worked. We even had cartoons on TV about a bill and how to create a bill and how it went down to Washington, D.C. But we understood how the government is who had the power to do what. It was very much harder to manipulate us.
Right.
Nowadays, most people in this country don't know anything about the government. To them, they say everything is the government.
Yeah.
Not realizing that the government actually comes as a separate entity. And it's not one part of the government that makes all the rules and regulations. Even Trump, even the things that he says he wants to do and able to do, he still has to get them approved. Now, we may say, well, he controls this and he controls that, but in reality, he may not, because you got the party of Trump and then you got the Republican Party. You still got people that are against him. So as much as he wants to be able to think he's going to be able to do, is that the government, the other parties of government may not allow him to do so. But anyway, with the civics class, a lot of us, the youth today, they need to learn civics, home economics, and this way they'll have a better understanding when they go down to the voting booth.
Yeah, but you know something? The reality is this, right? What you were just saying about Trump and having the ability to do certain things. Here's a man that was convicted, 34 felony convictions, who won the presidency with 34 felony convictions. So when you say he can't do these things, I'm quite doubtful that he won't be able to. Who's going to stop him?
Thank you.
You know, here's somebody Here's somebody that said when he ran the first time.
Where's he gonna get the money to do it?
He's
Well-
being funded by other sources that aren't the United States of America or its citizens. So he doesn't have to worry about where his money's coming from. When has he ever?
And you know something? He's got Elon Musk sitting next to him every day. And Elon Musk has billions of dollars,
Thank
hundreds
you.
of millions.
And like I said, he's
But
being
the money
funded.
doesn't come the money comes from taxpayers' dollars. That's the money that they utilize. They don't use their own money to do these things. They utilize taxpayers' money to do it.
I think there's
It-
room for discussion there.
You know what? If Elon Musk decides, if Greenland is up for sale and Elon Musk decides he wants to buy it, who's going to stop
Hold
him?
on a second. Sorry.
So I just think
Buying
that
power and influence is a very real thing, especially when you have that much money. So
exactly.
to say I'm worried about what Trump can or can't do, I'm just waiting to see what's going to happen. 'Cause
And I saw something the other night. One of the fastest growing populations in this country are billionaires.
interesting.
Billionaires.
How?
Well, because they invest properly, right?
They're
They have the
taxed
money.
less.
They have the money to invest.
Yeah,
They pay a fraction of the tax that you and I pay,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And they have the government on their side, creating legislation that makes it possible for them to make more money.
So is it possible more people are aspiring to be billionaires because there's so many perks?
Well, think about it. How many people play the lottery every day?
A lot.
Hundreds of million people.
Yeah.
Hundreds of millions of people
Yeah.
are playing the lottery, hoping one day to get those
It'll hit
numbers,
for them. Yeah.
right? So that they can be part of the 1%, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
There's a lot of moving parts with all of these, all these points here. But if we go back to our original point of what are the differences for my generation and the ones before us in
Mhm.
terms of how our life outlook is able to, like, how we're able to look at life and how it could be as opposed to how other generations were, and why we're so upset and why we don't feel like we have anything to fight for and why we're on such an individualistic level. I think we don't have the leadership that you guys had. We don't have the connection to community because we're so in these virtual worlds. And for us, like, we can connect without ever really connecting. So that's a problem as well. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? We can connect over the phone without ever connecting, but there's no impact there. So I think there's something to be considered with how can we have a greater impact in a way that actually we can actually see and feel. I don't know. I think we've always been trying to figure that out.
You know, I think that, so for my parents' generation, for them, there was a clear enemy. The enemy was Jim Crow. The enemy was segregation. The enemy was the fact that if you're walking on the sidewalk and white people are coming, you have to get off the
The
sidewalk.
rules are
into the
very
street.
black and white.
Exactly.
No pun
So it
intended,
was
but yeah.
clear who the enemy was.
Mhm.
Now it's not so clear,
Mhm.
right? So we're fighting. We're all looking for something. We're all grasping for something, but we're just not sure what it is we want, right?
Yeah.
And if you're not sure what you want, then there's really no understanding how to get there.
Yeah.
And I think that's a real problem. And I don't know if we've ever had a lack of leadership. We've always had leadership, but the problem is our leaders, we're not going to see them on CNN. We're not going to see them on MSNBC, right?
Mhm.
Hey, Ron, Amy, I got to go. Amy, when you ready to run for president, you got my vote.
We will talk. Thank you, sir. Have a good
Amy,
night.
You want to get into, you got my vote. Okay?
We will talk.
I'm right behind you 100% because I think you got it going on.
I appreciate that.
I'd just like to see you out there actually convincing and on television and all the stuff that you guys do so
Hey,
that you can convince other
You never
people
know.
to go along with you.
you never know. Thank you, Brother Kendall. I appreciate that. Have a good night.
All right.
Bye bye.
Yo,
Take care.
talk to you guys later. Peace.
Take care. Peace. Well, it's been an interesting hour.
It has.
And, you know, this conversation could go on and on and on.
Yeah, it could.
Right. And I think it's important to have these conversations because a lot of people may be listening, really don't understand the thinking of millennials or Generation Z. You know, you look at what you see in the media, and is it reflective of all people who are members of Generation X and who are millennials, who are, you know, Generation Z?
Mm-hmm.
it's not reflected, right? I mean, we talked briefly about Black Lives Matter. That was young people who were responding to
And
a
injustice.
need, an
Yeah.
injustice, right?
Mhm.
And it was the same thing with the Black Panthers. These were two
Yeah.
young men that saw the level of police brutality on the West Coast and said, we got to do something about it. And in a matter of years, there were chapters all over the country.
Yeah.
So for your people your age, there is that possibility. You know, every day children are born, right? And we don't think about it, but you never know who you're giving birth to. You know what I mean?
True.
Somebody gave birth to Malcolm X, somebody gave birth to Martin Luther King, and these were just men who came into this world with an idea.
Right. Or saw what was happening in their world and said, I'm going to do something about it, or I'm going to try to do something about it.
Well, I think that we are born with a
Think so.
mission.
Mm.
I think we're
With a
born
purpose,
a
for
mission.
sure. I agree with
Right.
that.
But I think we lose our way over time, right?
Mm.
And I think that's what's happened to a lot of us. But folks, it's been an interesting hour with Miss Amy.
Yes.
We're going to have to get together and we're going to talk about
We should
this
do
some
this more
more.
often.
We really should.
Yeah.
Right? You know, we need to discuss these things so we can better understand the people we share this planet with.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? You see young people all the time, and nowadays, so many of us are afraid to go up and approach them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because of what the media has shown up. They're violent, they're dangerous. Same thing was said about me when I was a teenager,
Right.
right? So yeah, we need to have these things.
We're
again.
having same issues. It's just different, maybe different specifics, but the general baseline of the problem is the same, and we have more in common than we think we do
We absolutely
between the
do.
generations. And I think it's really important for us to connect more of that so we can better understand each other. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And we're going to have these. We're going to retain these conversations. Maybe one day I'll come on your show.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll bring another millennial one day or another younger person.
Please do, because
Yeah.
you know what? We need to hear, from all sides.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But folks, I thank you for listening, and we will see you back here next Thursday for another Thoughtful Thursday.
Yes. Thank you guys. Have a great night.
Good night. Oh, you dropped your bag.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know. Oh, you going to get Terry? He's coming? Okay. Thanks for coming. I know it was short notice.
Thank you. No, that's okay. I'm not too far, so I'm never mind just running over here.
Oh, okay. Huh?
I sent you a text. You get it?
You know what? I was really
We were so
looking at
deep in
the phone.
conversation.
We're trying to talk to each other and talk to Kendall, and that's kind of hard to do.